The Bible was written over the course of hundreds and hundreds of years. Even the newest books are still from another world to us today. But not all places and sites mentioned in the Bible are completely gone. So let's go through the top 10 places mentioned in the Bible that you can still go to visit today. Number 10. Mount Tabor. Mount Tabor is in the Jezreel Valley, 6 miles east of Nazareth, 11 miles southwest of the Sea of Galilee. It once marked the boundary between the territory of tribes Zebulun, Issachar, and Naphtali, and it gets an honourable mention in Psalm 89, verse 12. In Judges, the prophetess and judge Deborah commands Barak to gather an army from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun at Mount Tabor to march down and defeat the Canaanites. Gideon avenges his brother's death by executing the Midianite kings Zebah and Zalmunna on Mount Tabor also. Mount Tabor is also identified as the site of Jesus' transfiguration in Matthew 17, 1-9. The disciples woke from a catnap to see Jesus talking with Moses and Elijah, his whole figure radiant as sunlight itself. It's been a site of regular pilgrimage for over a millennium. You can simply drive by it through the valley and enjoy the view, or you can have a specific private tour to make the long climb up. Number 9. The Jordan River. 156 miles long and, only the site of Jesus' baptism, the Jordan is an incredibly significant location. It flows from the Sea of Galilee down to the Dead Sea. It is mentioned early on in Genesis 13 verse 10, where Lot chooses the land of the Jordan Valley next to the Jordan River. It was a vital symbol of transition for the Jewish people after their 40 years wandering the desert. To cross the Jordan was to very much become the next generation of Jewish people, those who entered the Promised Land referenced throughout the Old Testament up to that point. Moses was forbidden to cross the Jordan, and never entered the Promised Land himself, though he led his people to it. The number of mentions the Jordan River gets as a place of significance in the Bible is incredibly high. In Judges, it was an important strategic point in the conflict with the Midianites. In Samuel, Saul and his sons die near the Jordan River. Many mentions are made of crossing this river in battle. The prophet Elisha told Naaman the Syrian to bathe in the Jordan to cure his leprosy. In the New Testament, John the Baptist preached by the Jordan River a lot, and it was at this very river that the Spirit descended upon Jesus, beginning his ministry in earnest. You can visit it today and be baptized here yourself if you like. You can even rent a gown for your baptism. Nifty. Number 8. Mount Sodom. Mount Sodom is, of course, named for the city of Sodom, raised in the Bible for the unrepentant sinful behaviours of its inhabitants. It looks like it does because the soil of Mount Sodom is very salty. Over the years, some of the compressed layers of earth, rock and salt have become separated from the mount itself. Notably, one of these little separated pillars is called Lot's wife, in reference to Genesis 19:26, where the wife of Lot turns around to look at the destruction of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, contrary to what the angel instructed her. The Mount of Sodom is not the site of the condemned city. It is disputed where exactly Sodom used to be. Most often, Bab Edra is cited, which is here in relation to the mountain. Another candidate is the Dead Sea, beneath the waters of Al-Lisan in the shallows, which is here. You can hike up Mount Sodom today. Number 7. The ruins of Lachish. Lachish used to be one of the most important cities in the Kingdom of Judah, being mentioned as part of the historic battles of Joshua, King Sennacherib, and King Nebuchadnezzar. It now stands in ruins. It was identified as the biblical city of Lachish by American archaeologist and biblical scholar William F. Albright. Despite being a ruin, it remains to this day a site of massive archaeological interest, rich with things to discover. For example, King Sennacherib marched on Judah around 701 BC, and thousands of arrowheads can be found embedded in the recovered siege ramp constructed by King Sennacherib's forces. We also find in Lachish the Israelite palace, which gave historians a better idea of how long a cubit actually was by descriptions of how it was constructed, its specifications. It's the largest known Iron Age construction in all of Israel. But it isn't just archaeology helping us to piece together the pictures of the Bible. The opposite also happens. Jeremiah 34 verse 7 tells us how the only remaining fortified cities of Judah are Azekah and Lachish. Using this alongside Lachish letter number 4, part of a series of potsherds inscribed with Hebrew discovered by the famous James Starkey, we can correctly deduce from the views across the countryside from Shephelah that these really are the remains of Lachish that we know today. If that sounds like your thing, book a private tour and take a wander around for yourself. Number 6. Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai, also known as Mount Horeb, is the secluded mountain peak on which Moses received the commandments from God to be relayed to the people of Israel. Fittingly, given its significance to the Israelites' journey out of Egypt, Mount Sinai is of course in Egypt, and is next to Mount Catherine, the highest mountaintop in the whole country of Egypt. It gets its first biblical mention in Exodus, and is the site of many of Moses' meetings with God. The actual location of Mount Sinai was disputed until about the 3rd century, where the modern location was agreed. You can take one of 2 trails up Mount Sinai, the Camel Trail, which isn't too steep, or the Steps of Repentance, said to have been made by a repentant monk, each and every step a symbol of his sorrow for his sins. Number 5. Nazareth, the Church of Annunciation. Nazareth is a city that still exists and functions today. The Church of Annunciation in Nazareth is what I want to focus on. You can visit the town itself if you like as well. Similarly to the Church of the Nativity, it is considered to be built over a cave that was the home of the Virgin Mary. The name of the church refers to the news the angel Gabriel gave to Mary, that she was to be the bearer of the Son of God on earth in his mortal form. Mary agreed to this. This whole interaction is referred to as the Annunciation. It is said to be in this cave where the Church of the Annunciation stands that this took place. An older church building from 1730 was demolished to make way for the church we see today in the 1950s. All relatively recent given the dates we've been discussing up to this point. It was around then that archaeologists found a grotto, part of a 4th century church. The grotto was subsequently what the church was built directly over. The lantern you can see at the top is meant to represent the light of the world, a reference to Jesus in John 8 verse 12. The cupola on it, when viewed from below inside the church, is meant to represent a lily, referencing Mary's purity. It's absolutely surrounded by archaeological discoveries, including a 1st century house, possibly one of the oldest in Nazareth full stop. Whether Christian or not, this is a place to visit. Number 4. Bethlehem, the Church of the Nativity. Bethlehem still exists as a town in its own right, but I wanted to give special mention to the Church of the Nativity. The Church of the Nativity marks the birthplace of Christ, commemorating the moment at which he was born, humbling himself by becoming man, fully God, fully man. It was built over the cave recognized as Christ's birthplace, and officially dedicated in 339 AD. Early religious tradition stipulates that Jesus was born in a cave. However, although no mention of a cave specifically was made in scripture, houses around this time in Nazareth are known to have been built near caves, to use them as storage, essentially. So this claim is entirely possible. A revolt in the year 529 AD badly damaged the church, which was rebuilt by Emperor Justinian I, making the Basilica of the Church of the Nativity the oldest complete basilica in the world. Religious unity between Muslims and Christians especially has been keeping this church safe. It has survived many uncertainties, including in 614 when Persians invaded Palestine, but spared the Church of the Nativity. Allegedly, this is because they saw a mosaic of the 3 wise men in Persian dress. The church is off Manger Square in the very centre of Bethlehem on the west bank of Palestine. Number 3. Capernaum in Galilee. Capernaum was a dinky little fishing village just off the Sea of Galilee, 2 miles west of the Jordan River. Jesus spent his Galilean ministry years performing miracles and preaching in Capernaum. It is even called Jesus' own city in the Bible. Well, unless you're St. Jerome, who seems to suggest that this may have referred to Nazareth. Matthew 4 verse 13 also tells us how Jesus left his hometown of Nazareth to live in Capernaum. This is the town where he eventually met 5 of the men who become his disciples later on: James, John, Peter, Andrew, and Matthew. It was also on the site of the synagogue at Capernaum, which you can visit, where Jesus gave the famous Sermon on the Bread of Life. Dating this synagogue itself has been difficult, and it's possible that the synagogue we see here today is atop the original synagogue where Jesus actually gave this sermon and performed various miracles. This is another place you are welcome to visit on a private tour. Number 2. The Mount of Olives. The Mount of Olives is one of the 3 hills to the east of the Old City part of Jerusalem, and is an important setting in all the Abrahamic faiths. Although the whole ridge of limestone rock is identified as the Mount of Olives technically, it's the southernmost peak that most people are interested in, and this is some 808 meters above sea level. It is first mentioned in 2 Samuel 15. It is also in the book of Zechariah, Kings, Ezekiel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Acts. Mentioned in Luke 24 verses 50 through 51 specifically is the site of Jesus' ascension into heaven. A joint mosque and church was built on this site and still exists today to commemorate this. Jewish tradition posits that the true Messiah will arrive at the Mount of Olives on Judgment Day, descending from above, and so the Messianic era is to start on the Mount of Olives, which is why Jewish people are still buried here to this day. Jewish tradition also states that prophets Haggai, Malachi, and Zechariah are all buried on the Mount of Olives too. You can still visit what are said to be their tombs. Number 1. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Also known as the Church of the Resurrection, this church and holy shrine is in the old city part of Jerusalem as well. It was supposedly built on the site of Jesus' tomb, the tomb left empty, of course, after his resurrection. The historian Eusebius tells us that Roman Emperor Hadrian had a temple to Venus built on the site of Jesus' tomb in order to distract from and obscure the site of his burial. However, Emperor Constantine the Great, a Christian convert, replaced the temple to Venus with a church around 336 AD. This was when the tomb was rediscovered and speculated to be where Jesus himself was buried. However, we are not sure whether this really was the site of the tomb. It may be that the tomb was controversially at another site known as the Garden Tomb, or that the location has just been lost to us completely. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre has been rebuilt, renovated, and extended over the years, to the point that it now covers Golgotha, including the Rock of Calvary, the site where Jesus may have been crucified. I mean, he was crucified, but we aren't 100% sure this is the exact place. John 19 verses 41 through 42 tell us that the site of his burial was very close to the place of his crucifixion, so this is plausible. The church also contains a stone tablet on which Jesus' body was supposedly anointed before his burial. Control of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is currently shared between multiple religious groups. So, there you have it. That's my top 10 places significant to the Bible, but you can still visit today. History is not nearly so alien nor so far away as it can sometimes feel when all you have is a history book or a historical text. These places are still tangible, and the rich histories behind them palpable when you visit. I'd love to visit a few of these one day. If you travel, make sure to do it safely. Don't travel alone, and make sure at least a few people know where you are. Been to any of the places in this list already? Tell me your stories. Well, that's all from me. If you like that, check out the rest of my channel. God bless.